Okay, great. Thanks, George. Our next question will come from Romans, who is posing a question on behalf of Futurama.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I have a question here from one of my favorite forum members, Futurama. Kind of deals with what you've been talking about. He says, one economic factor I consider urgently important and which is virtually unspoken of in the media is the effect on our economy of the massive destruction of asset values that has occurred over the past 5 years or so. For example, asset values of residential real estate, commercial real estate, stocks, bonds, business values, bankruptcies, etc. According to the research that Futurama has done, there has been more destruction of assets throughout the economy over that time frame than there has been Fed money creation. So, if there is 5 trillion less dollars worth of value on the balance sheets of all Americans combined today than there was 5 years ago, doesn't that point more in the direction of deflation? And then I'll have a follow-up.
The short answer is it would seem to. But remember what I was getting to a moment ago, looking at the Fed's money creation rate. It depends on how you want to measure deflation. So yes, I'll grant you that the average American home, even today, is worth between 20 and 30% less than it was worth in, 2007. So yes, that represents an asset that has dropped dramatically. However, because the Federal Reserve has been creating money, and most recently creating M1 at almost 30% per year, if you match the creation of money with the rate of incipient deflation, the effects of what would normally be a horrific deflation can be pretty much moderated. That's what the Fed, I think, is trying to do. I think they're trying to keep liquidity in the system. And even the still bailing out Europe with, looser funding for the central banks. Even if Europe goes through a partial disintegration, whatever the cost of that is, it's thought that Europe will be able to come back and remain competitive in the world marketplace and eventually pay back some of whatever the cost of bailing them out is. That's the economic fairy tale. The reality of it is that there has been asset deflation. I have an indicator I use which I call the aggregate index, and it's a much harsher view of the stock market than a simple measure like the S&P or the Dow Jones Industrials, because it includes the NASDAQ composite. And so if we look at the total wealth holdings of Americans on an inflation-adjusted basis, the real peak of the U.S. economy happened in about 2000, concurrent with the internet bubble peak. Where it goes from here, unfortunately, is down, and it will probably go down for at least another 5 years or longer, which would put us out in the 2017, 2018 kind of area. And that's when a lot of economists are looking for a real turnaround in the future of the world. A friend, Dr. Jack Lessinger, who's a professor emeritus of business history at the University of Washington, semi-retired up in the Bellingham area, has a wonderful book called Transformation. And it describes a kind of purified capitalism where the role of capital drifts. It becomes a little more socially conscious than it is presently, and it turns into something which actually is very good. Unfortunately, it's the part between here and 2020 that will be problematic, in particular if we have a war, which would simply hasten the asset destruction. Remember that asset destruction is one of the common features of economic depressions. Assets get wiped off the table all the time. Unfortunately, except for a few of us who've been out there pointing this out at the top of our lungs on the internet, most of the mainstream media has not had any particular reason to be candid with people about the end of 30 years of inflation that began in the 60s. And when that period of systemic inflation came to an end and we began our long slide down, the financial press not been especially good at bringing alternatives available to little people into clear focus. And part of that, unfortunately, is because of how advertising is so tightly tied to media. There ain't no money to be made, at least in any great measure, by taking by buying something like gold or even bonds, and yet bonds have turned out in the last few years to have performed very well compared to traditional levered inflation investments. And so, yeah, it ain't over yet. Your friend's probably right. Whether it's 5 trillion or 10 trillion doesn't really matter, because we're in a world where there's 250 trillion in swaps, credit derivatives, and what have yous. So the only number that really matters is how much money you've got in your bank account tomorrow to buy food with.
Right. The follow-up question, George, which you kind of alluded to a little bit, was he'd like to have your opinion as to why this factor is being totally ignored by the mainstream media, and whether or not you've integrated that component into your expectations as to what you anticipate in the future.
Yeah, I think I've anticipated it in my own personal plan. I am not a financial advisor. I am a sales and marketing guy that solves problems for companies that don't understand sales processes and how to streamline them. That's what I really do. The fact that urban survival and peoplenomics kind of got legs under them and became runaway little success stories while I'm trying to figure out strategies for companies is kind of interesting. But the reason that the mainstream media isn't covering this stuff is because, first, media doesn't make the news, unfortunately. They usually are in the position of reporting the news. And so because the media, especially the mainstream financial press, does not ask questions that are look ahead in value very well. And when they do, they tend to present extremes, which may or may not be correct. You can see some very, very good look-ahead journalism, by the way, when you look at guys like Dr. Doom, Dr. Mark Faber, being interviewed on CNBC, or Meredith Whitney, who's a superb bank analyst. And although she is sometimes early, she is usually right in the longer term. So the problem is not that the financial press totally ignores the look ahead stuff. The problem is that the financial press, uh, because it's easier to package, I guess, focuses on what I think of as idiot level economic stories. 10 ways to save money for your kid to go to college, or 13 ways to get rich returning pop bottles, or, crap like that. It's more of that bullshit filler stuff. And the real problem is we're in a country that's been hijacked by lobbyists and a banker class, and we've got to figure out how to get our jobs back, how to get factory ownership back into America, how to onshore the tax base such that transnationals are not hiding all their money offshore beyond U.S. tax jurisdictions, and so forth. So, yeah, we can quibble about all the little stuff, but the fact of the matter is that there aren't too many people in politics, with the exception of maybe Ron Paul and a couple of others, who are willing to stand up to the check beast and say, this ain't right. We have principles. Instead, we don't have principles. We have campaign contributions.
Right. Yeah. And Meredith Whitney, she was way early on that municipal call, but I think she'll be right in the end.
Yeah. I mean, and we're seeing the slow degradation. See what happened in the 1930s. Just to drop back to the 30s for a sec. The reason that depression came on so fast was that the little ma and pa banks down at the corner, they didn't have the money. I mean, when there was a run on banks in the 30s, if you went down to the bank and it shut its doors, you were screwed and you took the loss right there. And so when you took that loss immediately, you could not make your house payment. And so immediately, whoever held that mortgage came and foreclosed. And so things went very rapidly. But in this depression, the reason that people do not see it as a depression, and they don't see it as the class struggle it is between capital and the rest of us without it, is that it's happening in slow motion. When a bank closes, and we've had over 6,000 bank branches, 6,000 bank branches, including 17 more just this week at a little bank down in Louisiana. I think it was 3 or 4 at another bank. So about 20 bank branches this week alone were closed out or shotgun married off by FDIC. We haven't had a big WAMU or an IndyMac sized one happen in a little while, but that doesn't mean we won't. But if you look at what's going on in banking right now, in almost none of those cases did individual depositors suffer an immediate house-losing kind of financial impact. FDIC, to their credit, regardless of whether they printed the money up or not, doesn't really matter. To their credit, it has slowed down the snowball. We've got a big snowball, and the biggest snowball right now is in Europe. And from a long wave economic perspective, excuse me, one of the hardest problems is, why are we taking 75 years or 85 years to run through an economic cycle, which previously took only 50 years?